The Kentucky high school, whose students are at the center of a video controversy, it's closed today due to safety concerns. Local authorities are also now investigating threats made against some of the Covington Catholic High students after videos shows an encounter with a Native American man in Washington. A chaperone who was on the trip says students were targeted for wearing MAGA hats and describes what happened.
I think that was one of the reasons they were targeted, and I think they were also targeted for what they stood for, which is Christianity, the right for life. We were standing there and we looked, and all of a sudden they turned their attention to our group, and they were screaming horrible, horrible things that I will not repeat to our children, to children. Not adults, they were screaming them at children.
Two Covington students are describing some of the apparent threats.
There have been many threats against our lives, against our parents. Some of these threats include that we should all be locked in the school and it should be burnt to the ground, the school being bombed, school shooting threats. It's really scary.
And Nathan Phillips, the Native American activist, saying he is willing to meet with the students, so we'll see if that happens. Jesse, I want to take a listen to an exchange on The View today, which kind of encapsulated this whole argument. Watch this.
Is it that we just instantly say that's what it is based on what we see in that moment, and then have to walk stuff back when it turns out we're wrong? Why is that? Do we keep making the same mistake?
Because we're desperate to get Trump out of office. I think that's the reason. I think the press jumps the gun a lot because we have so much circumstantial evidence against this guy that we basically are hoping that, you know, Cohen's got the goods and what have you. And so it's wishful thinking.
There you have it.
I've always said that show's filled with a lot of wisdom. What?
But no, well, because you might have a book one day,
Perhaps.
and then you might get invited to be on The View.
Very
But that was,
honest,
I think she was just saying what was on her mind, and maybe that is what happened.
It's true. I think the media tried to Kavanaugh these teenagers, and it's really inspired the rest of the country because you see this injustice, and they've turned these kids into folk heroes at this point just because of a face crime. The guy made a face and stood there and did what all adults tell young people to do at this moment. Not throw a punch, not yell, not do anything. He just stood there like this, and that was the crime. And this is a great lesson. Now, whenever you see a story in the media and everybody starts to pile on, step back, think about the Covington boys, and just wait until the facts come out. Some people are learning their lessons, and other people's aren't. I think some left-wing person went to a high school basketball photo, and the guys were going like this, and they said that's a white power symbol. No, that means someone just hit a three-pointer. Everybody knows that watches basketball. So we learned from Parkland, children are off limits. I thought that's what was supposed to be the lesson. And now you have a situation where the hat was offensive, the smirk was offensive, and this is coming from the same people that were yelling and chasing people and their families out of restaurants. So it doesn't really equate right now. And you mentioned the Indian at the top. He was not a Vietnam veteran. That came out. The New York Times had to clarify. He served during the Vietnam era.
Mm-hmm. There was the Washington Post, I think, that did that.
And the Times.
Well, maybe
they're all
because
correcting
you know why?
the story.
Because you read all these papers all day long, and so
Stacked on my desk.
That's how you know. Greg, David Brooks wrote a piece today talking about how we destroy lives today, and that when the story first broke on Twitter, everyone was like, "Oh, okay, so they must be racist," and then the next day it's like, "Oh, liberals must all be bad because they thought they were racist," and then it was just basically all of our biases coming out in one story.
Who's David Brooks?
He's a columnist for the New York Times, and Jesse read it earlier.
My mother's favorite author.
There are people who, even with the new information, are clinging to this like a life preserver. For example, actor has been Jim Carrey. This is his latest painting, in which obviously he is demonizing these teenagers. I have to hand it to him that now his pictures are as bad as his pictures. Anyway, reality. So right now what you're having is reality is crashing down. This was a left-wing fantasy. You had the perfect villains, right?
Yep.
With MAGA hats, white kids. You had the perfect victim, Catholic, at a pro-life. Perfect law and order suspect, right? You know, they just needed to have super rich parents who were architects. And then you had the perfect victim, Native American Vietnam vet who is isolated. So what happens with a story like that, it's too good to check. And between this story and the BuzzFeed story, the media is in worse shape than my liver after spring break. I don't know how you're going to come back from this.
Pretty bad.
Because it's so bad. But can I make one last point and then I'll shut up? This is a lot about the nature of social media. We don't understand how to use social media yet. The death threats, for example, are because there's a low barrier of entry for death threats. It used to be if you wanted to make a death threat, you had to call, take a risk, somebody traced your call, you get now anybody, you got 50 million people, how many million? 250 million people on the internet. At least 1% of them are psychopaths, and so they can make death threats.
There's 2 billion people on Facebook.
Yeah, so it's like it's I think we do not know how to deal with this massive behemoth. Is that how you say it?
Behemoth.
Behemoth, thank you.
Close.
And it also makes people lesser versions of themselves because we don't have eye contact. We can't read each other. So I can demonize you and you can demonize me and I can say, hey, I made a mistake. And you can say, well, that's not good enough.
And if it's something that supports your tribe or whatever your bias is, then it makes you feel better. But so here's a question, Jedediah. Everyone hates social media, but no one's getting off it. And is that because we're afraid we're going to miss something?
Yep.
Or because we're afraid we're not going to be able to police the other side? Or because we think that it's good for our own, it's where we belong now?
I think it's a little bit of everything. We're addicted to it. We're addicted to the rush.
Do not disturb.
Hashtag do not disturb. We're addicted to it. We're used to being there. We feel like if we're not there and everybody else is there, we're missing something. We feel like we need it to promote the brand. And a lot of people out there who don't have a microphone, we're lucky enough to sit here and have a microphone on television to say how we feel. Many people feel like, well, you know what? I don't work in television. This is my way to get my opinion out. Everyone kind of feels like a TV star out there. They get to say their piece. They get retweeted. They get it out there. And for all you know, somebody with a big microphone will pick that up, and now all of a sudden they become famous. In this debate, though, I have to say I appreciate the Joy Behars of the world because they are bluntly honest. She is willing to say what a lot of people in media won't say, which is that there is a mission to bring down President Trump at all costs, and they are willing to do that whether the information is true or not, and that if they see an opportunity to paint somebody with a Make America Great Again hat or at a pro-life rally or whatever the circumstance allows, if they have the opportunity to paint them as bigoted or racist or whatever it needs to be and tie them to Trump, they're going to do it. So I appreciate that. You need people like that because so many people in media, like Greg said before, they're sticking to their argument, but they're not telling you why. They're not being honest about this is a mission to take down the president. They're just saying, oh, no, we're right. These kids really are racist and fishing. They're fishing for something in their past that might indicate that. You have to be grateful for the people on the left that are telling you exactly why they're doing it and what they're doing. And you have the facts then. You know what you're rallying against.
And then it also, Juan, comes to just how we get our news and the way that news outlets sometimes pay their reporters, which is, clicks. You're measured on how many times there's a website click to your story. Does that contribute to this?
I imagine it does. I think this is a bigger story about social media. I think we're all getting played badly by this story because, there's more video, but we only see portions of the video. There's a new video out. It says this 2 young women said these
We
high
have
school
that, actually.
kids.
This is a video that says that these women said that they were being harassed by some of these students beforehand. Do we have that to pull up?
I'm so tired already.
Yeah, so,
Right.
that's that.
So this is additional. Now this casts the kids in a very negative light as having harassed people previously with their MAGA hats and the language. But I think when I said we're being played badly, Dana, I'm talking about Twitter today had to suspend an account, 2020 fight. Why did they suspend this account? Well, listen to this. They publish highly polarized political content, left and right, intended to divide people. Supposedly based in California, turns out based in Brazil, and they don't exactly know who's putting it out. But they are tweeting 130 times a day, 40,000 followers. The video, which they pushed aggressively, was then bought into by mainstream media in this country. And again, the initial interpretation proved to be wrong. But at that point, they had 2.5 million people looking at this video and leaping to some kind of conclusions. I will say this, Nathan Phillips, the veteran Native American elder, said, The kid has never apologized to him. He felt stared down, and he felt threatened by the kid, and he thought that what the black Israelites were up to was offensive, but he thought the kids and the Israelites were about to clash, and he was trying to be a peacemaker. So now you get people on either side, especially the right, in the fact that, hey, a lot of the initial interpretation was wrong, saying, oh, now the kids are to be protected, they're angels. I think that, boy, we as Americans, we get fragmented, divided intentionally by these people for some reason, and we play into it. We are such dummies. I don't believe it.
Maybe people have learned a lesson, but imagine what's going to happen when the deep fakes start getting out
I think
there.
to Juan's point, it is really about the chain of ownership of that video. It was mainstream media who picked that up and didn't vet it, and they should.
Says the Senate will vote Thursday on 2 bills to potentially reopen the government. One is the president's plan with funding for the border wall. The second, a House bill that does not include money for the wall. All this comes as the White House is planning to move forward with the president delivering his upcoming State of the Union address in Congress. Sources saying if the speech doesn't take place at the Capitol, it could happen from a location outside of Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, the race for the White House turning into the apology primary for top Democrats, pressure from the left appearing to cause some 2020 contenders to say sorry for their past records or past positions. Although he's yet to declare, Joe Biden is the latest one. He now regrets supporting tougher drug laws.
I haven't always been right. I know we haven't always gotten things right. It was a big mistake when it was made. We thought we were told by the experts that crack, you never go back. It was somehow fundamentally different. It's not different. But it's trapped an entire generation.
To the women in our campaign who were harassed or mistreated, I apologize.
Many years ago, I apologized for my words and, more importantly, for the negative impact that they had. I sincerely repeat my apology today.
I listened, and I realized that things I had said were wrong. I was not caring about others. I was not fighting for other people's kids the same way I was fighting for my own, and I was wrong to feel that way.
Do I wish that sometimes they would have personally consulted me before they wrote the things that they wrote? Yes, I do. But the bottom line is the buck stops with me, and I take full responsibility for what my office did.
Jedediah, what do you make of the Democrats? I know a lot of people are saying, well, there's so much pressure from the left on these candidates. And other people are saying, well, maybe they should apologize. I mean, in the case of Tulsi Gabbard, we just saw there, the congressman from Hawaii, she had been pretty strongly anti-gay.
Yeah, I think the media, of course, will say this is just evolving. Oh, they just evolved. I would love to say that this hard left is just a minority and that this isn't going to work and you need to appeal to independent voters. But the truth is, I think that the moderates on the left are in the minority. I actually think a lot of Democrat voters now agree with what these people are saying, what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is saying. There was a recent poll, the Hill-Harris X poll, that said 59% of registered voters support a 70% marginal tax rate. I think that Democrat voters, particularly millennials, are going for what sounds good. It sounds good to say stuff's going to be free education, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, less fossil fuels. That all sounds good, and no one's paying attention to the fact that none of these people, none of these candidates can explain how that stuff's going to get paid for, how it's not going to bankrupt industries in this country. And unfortunately, in the social media age, that soundbite works. So I think that their shift to the left actually is probably a smart one. And I think most of their voters will actually fall in line with them and be more supportive of a hard left candidate, even though I wish that wasn't the case. And I want to say moderates still exist in the Democratic Party. I think they're the minority.
Well, we'll talk more about Ocasio-Cortez in the next segment. I have something I wanted to say to you to rebut something. But let me just turn to Jesse on Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden is someone that a lot of Republicans really don't have that much fight with. And here he is saying he thought that when he was in the, I guess mostly in the 1990s, imposing additional prison penalties for the use of crack cocaine, he was wrong. You heard him say, everybody at the time was saying crack, there's no coming back from crack. What do you make of that?
Yeah, crack is whack. And
thanks, Jesse.
He's right about that. Say no to drugs, kids. Can I speak in generalities? My preferred method of speaking. When you're a Democrat, it's good to apologize. When you're a Republican, you should never apologize. And here's why. When you're a Republican, if you apologize, you look weak. And if you're a Democrat and you apologize, you look compassionate and look like you're evolving. The thing is, the Democratic Party has evolved so much just over the last 10 to 15 years. They've changed their positions on immigration, criminal justice, social justice, drug policy, gay marriage. If you look at the positions 10 and 15 years ago, those were held by Democrats. Now, they don't hold those positions anymore, but here's their problem. They call Republicans that hold those positions evil. So when you're asked the question, well, you held the same position 15 years ago, were you evil back then? Yeah. They say, oh, well, I wasn't evil, but Republicans that hold the same positions I held 15 years ago, they're evil. So the whole offensive strategy doesn't work anymore.
Okay. By the way, I thought that what we heard from Gillibrand was that she said she was wrong. She was looking out for her kids, not everybody else. She wasn't looking out. So I thought she said she was wrong.
You thought Gillibrand said she was wrong?
That's
but she said she's not Trump. She said Trump is evil for having the same positions I held 10 years ago.
In other words, she was well-intentioned.
All right, all right. So, Dana, when we hear about someone like Kirsten Gillibrand, who was an opponent of amnesty for illegal immigrants, wanted to increase funding for ICE and other things, and now says, no, what do you make of that?
I think, well, the apology does two things, one good, one bad. One is that you can say, I've addressed this, I'm moving on. Okay, so that you can keep pointing back to the one apology that you made. But the second thing, though, is that the bad thing is it makes you look inauthentic. And what do voters really want? They want authenticity. That's why Beto O'Rourke is on the road typing out some pros as he goes along, because people feel like, okay, they want to know that. President Trump never apologizes for anything. And I was actually surprised with Joe Biden because, to your point, that maybe there might be some soft Republicans who think, oh, maybe Biden wouldn't be so bad. The thing is, but one of the reasons that a soft Republican might like Joe Biden is because he did the right thing at the time, which was he was tough on crime. And if you look at our crime rates, that actually had an effect. So he has to pander to the left, which I think will hurt him in a general if he were to get there.
By the way, so, Greg, this is so interesting to me because I remember when people on the left, in specific black Democrats, were going after Hillary Clinton. Do you remember this? Because they said Hillary Clinton was tough on drugs and the like. And Hillary Clinton, and then they said, are you going to make a statement that you're not racist black? And she said, you know, we could get Yankee Stadium to say this. It's a matter of policies, and here are real prescriptions. So when I hear this from some of these people, I think, very interesting. Martin Luther King Day, there are audiences in Harlem, black churches. What do you think of this?
I don't know. I just keep thinking about somebody who's like legally separated, trying to get back with his wife and saying, I've changed. I'm changed. I'm not like that old guy. I think Biden's apology, to your point, is strange because there was a dramatic decline in crime over the last, like, I don't know how many decades, and the crime bill probably had something to do with it. However, there might be good parts of the crime bill and bad parts of the crime bill. I don't know enough about the differences between crack and criminality and other types of cocaine and criminality. The argument here is that people doing crack were treated differently than people doing powdered cocaine. I don't really know the details in this kind of world. I've never tried a drug in my life. Anyway, but my point is, there might have been a criminality aspect, a gang mentality. I don't know. That had to do with crack cocaine. Who knows? All I know is we saw dramatic reductions in crime.
But hang on, can I just speak to that for a second?
Sure.
But didn't the President Trump, and Jared Kushner, and didn't they just do it? And a lot of this is about high rates of people being incarcerated, especially minorities and poor people.
But both things can be true.
All right. I was just going to get to the point that the problem when people change minds is that they can be very sincere or they could be pandering. And it's hard to tell.
We know, though. We know when it's a pander.
Our current president changed his mind on a lot of major issues. I mean, he liked Hillary. He liked Bill. I think he voted Democrat. I believe that it's actually okay to change your mind. You don't have to be a prison of two sides. And you can actually say the crime bill is good and has some bad parts to it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But the problem with what right now is that the hard left makes it so that they keep shifting the morality every year. So in 5 years, everything that we say on the 5 will prevent us from running for office.
Thank God.
Yes.
I don't want to run.
Some other things preventing us, too.
That's it. I think you'll be 35 by then.
Oh. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez continues to be the darling of the left. A new poll shows 74% of Democrats say they would consider voting for the congresswoman if she were old enough to run for president, since she's only 29. This comes as the self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist is under fire for taking this shot at capitalism.
A system that allows billionaires to exist when there are parts of Alabama where people are still getting ringworm because they don't have access to public health is wrong. It not only doesn't make economic sense, but it doesn't make moral sense.
Ocasio-Cortez also making waves with her dire prediction about the impact of climate change.
Millennials and people and Gen Z and all these folks that come after us are looking up, and we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it? And like, this is the war. This is our World War II.
And she has this response to critics in her own party.
On a scale of 0 to some, how many do you give?
I think it's 0.
Very good. All right, Greg, she said a lot there. Take your pick.
All right, well, she's doing two things right. She's capitalizing on a fear, which in this case she was talking about climate change. You could say that Donald Trump did the same thing with immigration. A legitimate, some say legitimate fear, some say not legitimate. Climate change, some say legitimate, some say not. But she's doing the same thing. And within the climate change argument, she is working on exaggeration in tertiary sources, secondary sources. But so did Donald Trump. So she's also doing something that Donald Trump is doing, saying memorable things that are direct, in her world, directionally true. They might be completely inaccurate, but directionally true in her. That's why she gets the applause. The world could end in 12 years. Obviously, that's wrong. But in their heads, they're going, well, her heart's in the mind. Her mind is going in the right direction. So while we can mock her for all of this, but we're guilty of what everybody else did with Trump on Morning Joe and CNN, which is laugh, laugh, laugh until you built her up to a certain stature that you can't laugh at her anymore. And I think that's why even her peers in the Democratic Party are upset. They dislike her because she's on 60 Minutes. She's on Colbert, and she just showed up. That ticks her off. What does that sound like? It sounded like the Republican Party with Trump. So it's becoming an identical mirror.
Greg, you're on fire this week. I have to give
Why, thank you.
Really,
what are you doing later? Cocktails on the veranda?
Really smart comment.
Mid-juleps?
He has to stop at the cobbler first.
At the cobbler. Okay, so I'm wearing sneakers because
His shoes are at the cobbler.
Drop the Chiron. Yeah, I said my shoes are at the cobbler. Is cobbler not a current term for a shoe repairman? Anyway, let's get back to AOC. What do you think?
I think that AOC is the intellectual leader of the left.
That's sad, Dana.
And the polls are backing that up. And they're all having to respond to her. We'll see how they handle their Donald Trump, right? I just said in the break that I would love to sit next to President Obama while he listens to something like that and to hear what he thinks, because it would be interesting to hear. Some of her ideas, right, it's not just that they're unaffordable, it's that they're bad ideas. And so then how do you counter those bad ideas? Even if they are directionally true in her mind, then you got to explain why they're bad ideas, and we could give you a million examples. I'm going to tell you where I think the Democrats have a good point on the economic argument against President Trump. The way you hear them frame it, and I think the Republicans better pay attention to this, it's that there was a tax cut was for the rich. It absolutely helped the rich. You look at the stock market, look at what the companies did. They bought stock back. They didn't reinvest. You have billionaires that are wealthier. You have wages that have only gone up 2%.
Knock it off, Dana.
I'm just telling you.
Wow.
If you read Marianne Marsh, she is often frequently seen on Fox News. She writes at foxnews.com. She writes a piece this week that I think they have a way to make an economic argument against President Trump, and the Republicans better pay attention.
Okay, we love when you give advice to Democrats, Dana. Don't we?
They don't take it. Nobody
Juan
takes
never
it.
listens. He never listens.
Are you kidding? I think she's terrific. I mean, to me, the interesting part here is the tax on people who make more than $10 million, because that was so widely condemned as inviting us to be the next Venezuela and a toilet paper shortage and all the rest. And then I look at the numbers, and the numbers say 59% of Americans agree with the 70% marginal tax rate, including Jedediah, 45% of Republicans, 60% of independents, 70% of Democrats. And here's the thing. We're talking about her. The Washington Post says that she is now the zeitgeist of American politics because she rivals Donald Trump. She's second only to Trump in terms of politicians and their Twitter handles. And, of course, you know that when people are asked if they would vote for her versus Trump, Trump gets 43%, she gets 40%, 17% undecided. So if she was 35, your age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And eligible to run for president, she would be a really strong candidate.
Mm-hmm. Jed, you think so?
I disagree. I don't think she's an intellectual leader. I think she's a populist leader. I think she says a lot of the right things, but I think it's not smart is the problem. And she's probably the easiest person to debate on the left because none of this stuff. All you have to do.
Well, she doesn't debate anybody.
Right, and she doesn't go on shows where she's challenged either. You look at capitalism and you look at socialism and you look at those countries. Look at countries that have rich capitalism and watch what it's done to the economy. Look at socialist countries. Unfortunately, in this country, we're getting to be where we have to walk through the mud in order to experience it. Like, why do we have to suffer through socialism to understand that socialism is bad? Other countries have paved the way for us to get that message. And I agree with Dana that she is a leader. I just think that if you watched her in an interview where she actually got challenged,
well, I think she was challenged by Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes.
The electric
I mean, 60 Minutes is not an easy interview
questions
for anybody.
stumble her too. Like it seemed challenging, but there were some basic questions.
Like, how are you going to pay for that?
Yeah.
By the way, you know, your description of her and, not debating simplistic statements. Boy, it sounded just like
and populist leader. I mean,
all right, ahead.
That's true.
How would the five handle being stuck in a grounded plane for more than 16 hours? I think we know. We're going to talk about this travel nightmare ahead. But first, Gladys Knight defends her decision to sing the national anthem at the Super Bowl after facing backlash. Found out why.
Gladys Knight will be singing the national anthem at the Super Bowl, which is a great choice. I would have sung it myself, but why steal Tom Brady's thunder? Of course, thanks to a media whose business model is conflict, the anthem controversy still lingers like a bad odor. It's one of those stories where you can always begin a sentence with, yet there are some who are criticizing Knight for accepting the honor. Whenever I hear some, I wonder, who are they? Some, like multiple unknown forces. It seems like some is everywhere. Some say this, some say that, some say reporters without sources use some. Sadly, we are now at the mercy of some when there aren't even any. It's a make-believe democracy. How does Knight respond to such criticism? Quote, I pray that this national anthem will bring us all together in a way never before witnessed, and we can move forward and untangle these truths, which mean so much to all of us. She's saying what we feel. Enough already. Let's move on. I'm with her. She looks great, by the way.
Amazing.
Fact is, every issue, be it immigration, climate, or crime, the media desires only two positions. In the anthem case, you're either for standing during the anthem or against police brutality, when in fact 100% of the general population can hold both positions. Gladys holds both, advocating for justice and the anthem. So I'm sure she will do a great job, probably even better than me, even though I'm sure some will disagree. Okay, I look at her. She has not aged in like 40 years.
Reverse aging.
It's incredible.
Yeah. I know. We got to ask her what her secret is.
What if she says?
Probably facials, you know. I recommend them.
Did you go get one?
Not today.
Yep.
I think, Juan, the good news is she's doing the national anthem. The bad news, Maroon 5 is still playing at halftime.
Oh. Well, I know you don't like them. I love Gladys Knight, Midnight Train and all. But I must say, it's so interesting, this controversy. Someone said if she wears a Colin Kaepernick shirt, they'll applaud her. But she's having to apologize because there's so many people, I think, especially in the black community, who say, hey, what about Colin Kaepernick? That's why other artists refuse to participate because they don't want to endorse the idea that NFL, everything's normal.
Peer pressure. Aren't you against peer pressure? I'm tired of peer pressure.
Also, if Colin Kaepernick were given a job, then they're going to find another reason to go after her for singing the national anthem. Maybe we should just give him a job for the rest of the season.
There you go.
Get it? There's no
more
season
season.
left. I know.
You could have tricked me. I had no idea, Jed. Is it a time? Like her message is, can we just unite? And her idea is that the anthem is separate from the social justice issues, which makes total sense.
And she has a long history of fighting for social justice issues, for racial injustice, for
much like Jesse.
AIDS research, for diabetes.
I think her record's better than Jesse's.
Slightly. But yeah,
Thanks for clarifying, Juan.
You're welcome.
It's kind of sad, though, that it's people are stunned that she would say that the national anthem could be used as a unifying force. The country's so removed from that now and has made the national anthem so divisive that for her to come out and just say, look, you can be a social justice warrior and sing the national anthem and have this be a unifying moment almost sounds foreign to people. That's kind of sad to me.
I think Jesse, it's almost every segment or issue that we talk about these days has to do in its core an identity politics.
Yeah. It does,
and it never ends well.
It does.
Maybe this will finally be a healing moment. I hate to say healing moment.
Well, I was going to use another analogy. I think Gladys basically put the last shovel of dirt on Kaepernick's grave. Here's why.
That's a strange analogy.
Kaepernick is over. Okay. No one cares about Kaepernick anymore. None of the players even knelt barely at all this year. I mean, it hasn't really been a controversy much this year at all.
Was it because they didn't show?
Except for the Eagles didn't go to the White House, but on the field, players are not kneeling anymore. Kaepernick is now, how many years has he been out of the league? He's never coming back to the NFL. And like you said, the only people making a big fuss about this are a few people on Twitter. Gladys Knight's well-respected social media warrior like myself and shot down all of these people and repeated the talking point that I've been using the entire year. Gladys, thanks for watching and listening, is that the anthem is a moment of national unity, and that's where everybody should come together and you can talk about social justice afterwards.
I think there are at least 3 moments in what you said that have upset like half of America. Yes. I don't know which. I think I counted at least 3.
We have one more segment left on the show.
I can't imagine anybody.
You can't speak to Congress that Nancy Pelosi told the president when she said that a State of the Union address was probably ill-advised, but he'd be open to hearing the president. So whether that marks new ground and signs that there's going to be a vote on Thursday, a Democratic vote which pushes their initiatives to end the shutdown, and a Republican vote that hopefully cobbles together, Republicans say, some Democratic votes to end the shutdown. We're a long way from there, though. Let's get the read from Fox Business Network's Charlie Gasparino and Susan Lee and former UBS America CEO Robert Wolf. Robert, the fact that they're talking even past each other is more than they've been doing. So I found that kind of hopeful.
Yeah, I think it's hopeful. It's ridiculous we have a shutdown. It was ridiculous in 2013. It's more ridiculous today because it's about 7 times the number of days. We could right now, if this was a mediation, the 6 or 7 agencies would all open up and you'd have a continuing resolution just for Homeland Security to discuss border security. Everything
but
else.
Neither sides trust the other, right?
But before Christmas time, the Senate voted unanimously to pass what the House is voting today, to open everything up and have a continuing resolution till February 8th, just for the Homeland Security discussion. So I'm not sure why that isn't what we're doing.
A couple of new developments now, Susan, and I'm not here to finger point on it, but Nancy Pelosi then added the wall is immoral. It better not be part of the discussion. Steny Hoyer seemed very open to that. So I did notice ice melting a little bit here, but I could be misinterpreting it.
Well, I would say that the economy probably needs at this point, since right now we're looking at the economy being impacted by 0.1% every week. If we get to the end of this month, that's actually
the impact of every week we have the shutdown.
Right.
We're washing this quarter.
And multiplier effect, because it's not just the furloughed workers not getting their pay, then that extends to consumer confidence, that extends to consumer spending, and we might reach a point where the U.S. economy has lost more than the cost would have been for the wall.
But what's interesting, Charlie? We're now at the point, whatever people's opinions on this matter, that each side is dug into the base of their respective party. The Democrats or the far left, or whatever you call it, and Republicans. It was the far right that dragged the president back and said on that first Mitch McConnell idea, no. Now, you know what I mean? And it's locking them into position.
And it's over immigration. And what you get the feeling is that the Republicans believe it's the flip side of what the Democrats believe. The Democrats really do believe that they need unfettered immigration. It is an existential threat, unfettered immigration, to Republicans ever winning the presidency again. Okay, if they could just keep immigrants coming in, they tend to vote Democratic for the first 2 generations. If it's unfettered,
but they already have that through legal immigration. We got 1.25 million who become legal Americans.
But you know, he's looking for caps on that as well, Trump. And the Republicans rightly say no, that it is a threat to them. And so that's why you have both bases digging in. I think the one problem that the Republicans have right now, I think, is the economy. And, you know, this is going to show up in economic numbers very fast. There are some economic numbers that are going to come out.
It's already affecting the housing data, right?
Right.
I mean, that's already very palpable.
Housing, consumer confidence was at their low. And I would say most economists are talking about third quarter.
But how is the shutdown affecting it? Or when a shutdown drags on, do people then say, all right, I hate both you guys. What do they do?
Well, I would say people are not enamored with Washington to begin with. But I really think that the president owns this shutdown. He's the president of the United States.
Has he made enough
He owns
overtures to you and talking about revisiting something like the DACA thing and all that to at least get Democrats to move?
So let me preface, I was never for this shutdown. I would have a deal. I'm for border security. I don't think the deal on the table with temporary DACA and temporary status is meaningful because he's the one that brought it to the forefront.
My point was just be clear. Was there enough bending on his part for Democrats, if you were to advise, and you've been in many negotiations, financial and otherwise, to do something in return?
I think there's a deal to be put on the table, but I don't think it's for temporary status.
Susan, what do you think of that?
Well, I think they should be making a deal at this point. Don't they have 6 bills on the table to reopen government while they negotiate the border wall?
Well,
Let's
you're
do
agreeing
that.
with me.
Well, I know it's surprising.
I like that.
I don't
Do we
think
have anyone else agreeing with me?
I think they're more in common than they know. There was an openness of the wall on the part of Democrats with Barack Obama. There was an openness certainly on the part of Republicans as recently as the first 6 months of this administration for, you know, what the president wanted to do on DACA. So there's more common ground than that.
There's some common ground, but the bottom line is this. The Democrats know that they need immigration to remain at certain levels in order to maintain to keep their majority, to keep the presidency and maybe become almost unbeatable in the future. The Republicans know right now, because the cat's out of the bag, that unfettered, nonstop immigration from these countries, apparently poor people that always vote Democratic, or usually vote Democratic, and guess what? They usually feed off the welfare state. That they have to stop that. And I'm telling you that's why both
let's look at the
sides
economic
are dug in.
impact in the meantime. Larry Kudlow on the wire is indicating right now you get a predictable snapback when people return to work.
Right.
Do you buy that, Susan? It does happen with hurricanes and other disconnects and all, but what do you think here? He's saying whatever we're feeling now will be made up for when things resume.
I feel like the markets are pricing that in, aren't they? Because we had the worst December since the 30s, and now we have the best start to the new year since 1987. I feel like the markets are pricing in a snapback.
But I remember how 1987 ended. So, Robert, how do you look at this as far as the impact? What's more of a factor for you looking at the markets and investment in the economy?
Well, I think this definitely puts the Fed on a pause into March. So that there's no question that the market, part of the reason it feels good is because they don't think the Fed's going to do anything come March.
So we have a year without hikes.
Yeah, but you also have a global slowdown. I mean, the market was off 300 whatever points today because not because of the shutdowns, because the global slowdown is going to impact us, and that's really the fear.
All right, guys, I want to thank you all very much. We're going to keep on top of that. And we're getting to the point now where the economy is good enough that people are willing to pay thousands of dollars for a Super Bowl ticket.
For my Patriots.
Exactly. Robert's the only guy I know who can do that. You can't speak to Congress that Nancy Pelosi told the president when she said that a State of the Union address was probably ill-advised, but he'd be open to hearing the president. So whether that marks new ground and signs that they're going to be a vote on Thursday, a Democratic vote which pushes their initiatives to end the shutdown, and a Republican vote that hopefully cobbles together, Republicans say, some Democratic votes to end the shutdown. We're a long way from there, though. Let's get the read from Fox Business Network's Charlie Gasparino and Susan Lee and former UBS America CEO Robert Wolf. Robert, the fact that they're talking even past each other is more than they've been doing. So I found that kind of hopeful.
Yeah, I think it's hopeful. It's ridiculous we have a shutdown. It was ridiculous in 2013. It's more ridiculous today because it's about 7 times the number of days. We could right now, if this was a mediation, the 6 or 7 agencies would all open up, and you'd have a continuing resolution just for Homeland Security to discuss border security. Everything
but
else.
Neither sides trust the other, right?
But before Christmas time, the Senate voted unanimously to pass what the House is voting today, to open everything up and have a continuing resolution till February 8th, just for the Homeland Security discussion. So I'm not sure why that isn't what we're doing.
A couple of new developments now, Susan, and I'm not here to finger point on it, but Nancy Pelosi then added the wall is immoral. It better not be part of the discussion. Steny Hoyer seemed very open to that. So I did notice ice melting a little bit here, but I could be misinterpreting it.
Well, I would say that the economy probably needs at this point, since right now we're looking at the economy being impacted by 0.1% every week. If we get to the end of this month, that's actually
the impact of every week we have the shutdown.
Right.
We're washing this quarter.
And multiplier effect, because it's not just the furloughed workers not getting their pay, then that extends to consumer confidence, and it extends to consumer spending, and we might reach a point where the U.S. economy has lost more than the cost would have been for the wall.
But what's interesting, Charlotte? We're now at the point, whatever people's opinions on this matter, that each side is dug into the base of their respective party. The Democrats or the far left, or whatever you call it, and Republicans. It was the far right that dragged the president back and said on that first Mitch McConnell idea, no. Now, and you know what I mean? And it's locking them in the position.
And it's over immigration. And what you get the feeling is that the Republicans believe, and it's the flip side of what the Democrats believe. The Democrats really do believe that they need unfettered immigration. It is an existential threat, unfettered immigration, to Republicans ever winning the presidency again. Okay, if they could just keep immigrants coming in, they tend to vote Democratic for the first 2 generations. If it's unfettered,
but they already have that through legal immigration. We got 1.25 million who become legal Americans.
But he's looking for caps on that as well, Trump. And the Republicans rightly say no, that it is a threat to them. And so that's why you have both bases digging in. I think the one problem that the Republicans have right now, I think, is the economy. And, this is going to show up in economic numbers very fast. There are some economic numbers that are going to come out.
It's already affecting the housing data, right?
Right.
I mean, that's already very palpable.
Housing, consumer confidence was at their low. And I would say most economists are talking about third quarter.
But how is this shutdown affecting it? Or when a shutdown drags on, do people then say, all right, I hate both you guys. What do they do?
Well, I would say people are not enamored with Washington to begin with. But I really think that the president owns this shutdown. He's the president of the United States.
Has he made enough overtures to you when talking about revisiting something like the DACA thing and all that, to at least get Democrats to move?
So let me preface, I was never for this shutdown. I would have a deal. I'm for border security. I don't think the deal on the table with temporary DACA and temporary status is meaningful, because he's the one that brought it to the forefront.
My point was just to be clear, was there enough bending on his part for Democrats, if you were to advise, and you've been in many negotiations, financial and otherwise, to do something in return?
I think there's a deal to be put on the table, but I don't think it's for temporary status.
Susan, what do you think of that?
Well, I think they should be making a deal at this point. Don't they have 6 bills on the table to reopen government while they negotiate the border wall?
Well,
Let's do
you're agreeing
that.
with me.
Well, I know it's surprising.
I don't.
Do we have anyone else agreeing with me?
I think they're more in common than they know. There was an openness of the wall on the part of Democrats with Barack Obama. There was an openness certainly on the part of Republicans as recently as the first 6 months of this administration for what the president wanted to do on DACA. So there's more common ground than
there's some common ground. But the bottom line is this: the Democrats know that they need immigration to remain at certain levels in order to maintain to keep their majority, to keep the presidency, and maybe become almost unbeatable in the future. The Republicans know right now, because the cat's out of the bag, that unfettered, nonstop immigration from these countries, apparently poor people that always vote Democratic, or usually vote Democratic, and guess what? They usually feed off the welfare state. That they have to stop that. And I'm telling you that's why both
let's look at the
sides
economic
are dug
impact in the meantime. Larry Kudlow on the wire is indicating right now you get a predictable snapback when people return to work.
Right.
Do you buy that, Susan? It does happen with hurricanes and other disconnects and all, but what do you think here? He's saying whatever we're feeling now will be made up for when things resume.
I feel like the markets are pricing that in, aren't they? Because we had the worst December December since the 30s, and now we have the best start to the new year since 1987. I feel like the markets are pricing in a snap back.
But I remember how 1987 ended. So, Robert, how do you look at this as far as the impact? What's more of a factor for you looking at the markets and investment in the economy?
Well, I think this definitely puts the Fed on a pause into March. So that there's no question that the market, part of the reason it feels good is because they don't think the Fed's going to do anything come March.
So we have a year without hikes.
Yeah, but you also have a global slowdown. I mean, the market was off 300 whatever points today because not because of the shutdowns, because the global slowdown is going to impact us, and that's really the fear.
All right, guys, I want to thank you all very much. We're going to keep on top of that. And we're getting to the point now where the economy is good enough that people are willing to pay thousands of dollars for a Super Bowl ticket.
For my Patriots.
Exactly. And Robert's the only guy I know who can do that.